All right, and we're back for another episode of Black Life Amplified. It is the virtual town hall series hosted by the African American Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany L. Wright with Insight News. And before we get started, I want to give a very special thank you to our sponsors, which include the Minneapolis Foundation, Northpoint Health and Wellness, and Children's Minnesota for making this town hall possible. I also want to give a very special thank you to our community partner organizations who all come together twice a week to produce these town halls and to make all the magic happen. Very special thank you to Northpoint, Children's Minnesota, Insight News, Gray Matter, Minnesota Community Care, and of course, AALF. Now, be sure that you visit the African American Leadership Forum Facebook page or their YouTube channel to watch previous episodes of Black Life Amplified. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date on all future episodes. And today's episode is actually part 2 of a 2-part conversation. So if you haven't seen the first part of this conversation, make sure you go back and then you can watch this one. Today's conversation is focused on centering Black men's health. So I'm going to ask that our panelists be brought on stage right now. Producers, if you can make that happen. Welcome. This is different for today because normally we have a bunch of women on the show, but today we actually, the guys are representing a little bit, which is exciting. So please join me in welcoming, of course, Adriene Thornton, who is the Manager of Experience and Health Equity at Children's Minnesota. We have Joe Davis, who is a poet, an activist, a community healer, a Renaissance man, the best dressed on the panel today. We just gonna go ahead and call it out, and a good friend of the show. Welcome back, Joe. Thank you for being here. We also have Thomas Collins, who is the founder of Mind, Body, Spirit Holistic Fitness. He's also a Josie R. Johnson Fellow and a Social Impact Fellow with Minnesota Community Care. He's also a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And then, of course, we have Bruce Williams, who is the CEO and founder of Playful Yoga, as well as Human Luminous, who is also a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. So Adriene, your bros is here. They here today. Shout out to Delta Sigma Theta, Adriene. And of course, I'm a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, but we're not going to discuss that, at least not right now. First, I want to open up talking about COVID-19 and health equity. So I want to get the Black male perspective on COVID. Adriene and I talk about it every single show, but I'm curious to hear from Black men. So fellas, please tell us, briefly, are you vaccinated? And if so, why or why not? Bruce, I want to start with you.
Hey, thank you for having me. I currently am not vaccinated. It hasn't been put on my spirit yet that I need to be. Why and why not? There's a lot of questions that I have that have yet to be answered about the COVID-19 vaccination. Until I have those answers, I'm choosing to not do it.
Got you. TC, how about you?
Like you said, this is part 2. I expressed my sentiments about it last episode, and just to make it plain right now, it just comes down to the simple fact of me, I'd rather boost my immune system in a more holistic way before I just inject whatever they have in that needle in myself. I'd rather sit and wait. Maybe I might feel different in some years, but as of right now, like the brother said before, it's just not on my spirit,
Understood. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm right there with y'all, like the same. Like I've been doing everything I possibly can to keep myself, my community safe, but my spirit. Hey, until I do, this is where we at.
Got you. Okay, so Adriene, hearing our brothers. Now, I thought at least Joe might be vaccinated.
I was hoping for at least one.
Yeah. So, but it is what it is. And what I love about this, and I know all of these guys outside of the context of this show, they are all public figures in some way, performers, entrepreneurs, people who are providing services, and they're all healers. Right. As well. So I think this is very telling and very important for us to be reminded that there's more than one way to look at this pandemic and how we should go about keeping ourselves healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fellas, thank you guys for being honest about where you're at with it. Adrienne, now that we've heard this, what do you think that health institutions need to do to really meet community members where we're at? Because there are some people, we have a panelist who may or may not be joining us today. When I talked to him in pre-production, he said, I'm never going to get the vaccine. I don't care what you tell me. There are people who genuinely feel that way. So knowing that, what can health institutions be doing to still help decrease the rates of COVID?
Right. So, we can only do what we can do, right? So, thank you guys for sharing your truth. No judgment, do what you need to do. And I just want to remind people that, it's okay to have fear. It's okay to have questions. I've told my story multiple times on this show about my grandfather being part of the Tuskegee experiment and the resulting health effects that me and my siblings and my cousins all have as a result. So we won't rehash that. Totally understand the fear, the anxiety, the questioning. You should question. I don't recommend that anybody just jump in and say, oh, well, they said I should do it, so I'm going to do it. That is never what we recommend for people. I think what healthcare institutions have to do is continue to share the information and the science and the truth. I think part of the problem with the Black community right now is that we've heard so many different things from so many different people. And because there was a time where the government was saying something different from the CDC, and then the CDC had to backtrack because they were being strong-armed by the government, that causes more confusion, but that also causes more anxiety and hesitancy. And so with our long history of being misused and mistreated by the medical community, I totally understand why people don't want to do it. Said, I have a special needs son, and I also have some comorbidities. And so with that in mind, I would love, and I do herbal treatments. I'm not a total science and medicine person. And my physician fortunately understands that about me. So our first conversations are always, well, this is what you should do in your diet to remedy this issue that has now arisen. So this is not something that I don't do. I totally agree with that. But for me and my family, because of my child's condition, we are all vaccinated. We will continue to get vaccinated. And I only allow people in my home that are vaccinated because his life means too much to me for me to risk it. That's a huge risk for him. It's a smaller risk for others, but for him, it's a big risk. And it does come down to life or death. And I'm just not willing to put his life on the line by not getting vaccinated. So that's my truth. But, I think as a healthcare organization, all we can do is continue to be there to support people, answer their questions, help them find the information. And I want to just put it out there now. If there's anyone on this panel or outside of this panel that wants to have the conversation or has questions that they want answered because they don't have someone they feel like they can trust that actually is in the science and reading the science and, kind of synthesizing the science, reach out to me. I am available. I am here. Dr. Zeke McKinney is here. I've done family Zoom calls with families that had questions, So we are not just here only for the ALF Town Hall. We are here for you in whatever way you need us to be. And, the intention is not to change your mind immediately. Is to give you the information you need to make an informed decision, whatever that decision is.
Absolutely. And I got to say, I've been a recipient of that advice where I had questions about the vaccine and I asked Adrienne. My mom had questions and I was texting Adrienne like, okay, my mom want to know this. And ultimately, it was my daughter who was my motivation because I'm co-parenting. I didn't want a situation where I wouldn't be able to see her for an extensive period of time, nor did I want she's young, she's vulnerable, she's not old enough to get vaccinated. I just didn't want to take that risk. But it was not, despite all the conversations we had, Adrienne, I was still very, very hesitant. And so
I know.
I understand the hesitancy. Even Adrienne was the
Yeah.
one who gave me my vaccine, and even still, I was like, "Okay, sis, if I turn into a zombie, I'm coming to your house. It's gonna be me and you." So
I know, and people still have questions, but
yeah,
what we have to really pay attention to is the science, the real science, not
yeah.
the purported science or the fake science. And I just read a pre-publication just yesterday that came out, and it was looking at the unintended consequences of COVID-19, and that's orphanhood. And
Mm,
so we have more children being orphaned as a result of parents and guardians dying from COVID-19. And unfortunately, just like all the other stats, Black and Brown people or children are 1 to 4 times more likely to be orphaned as a result of their guardians. And that's parents, grandparents, whoever has guardianship and is caring for them. They're 1 to 4 times more likely to experience that orphanhood. And
wow.
so that is very scary and very sad.
Yeah.
You look at the Black couple that died recently and left 7 young children, behind. And that just broke my heart, because they had finally gotten to the point where they decided they were going to get the vaccine, but they waited too late,
Mhm.
So
And,
these are
and
all things that we should be considering.
well, speaking of the vaccine, now they're saying that people should be getting booster shots. So is that
Hmm.
specifically for people who are immunocompromised? And I joked about it last week. When you say booster in our community, it means something different. But in the
I
context
know.
of a vaccine, what we're saying is like you should go and get another dosage so that the vaccine continues to be strong, or is it
Well,
does the
you
new
have to have a certain level of antibodies to
Mhm.
remain safe from getting. And again, the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting COVID. It prevents you from getting seriously ill and or dying. So
Yes.
that is the goal of the vaccine. The vaccine is not to prevent you from getting COVID. You can still get COVID, but what we've seen in the studies is that all the people who are vaccinated, they're not admitted to the hospital, they're not in the ICUs, and a very small number of them are dying from COVID. I mean, it's so small you can barely see it, and we went over those stats last week. So that's important to know is, people keep saying, well, I got the vaccine and I got COVID. What good is the vaccine doing? Well, the vaccine is saving your life. It's
Mhm.
preventing you from having yet another hospital bill. It's preventing you from being in the ICU. It's preventing you from having those long-term effects from having COVID
Yeah.
because your immune system is better able to fight it. And so what we're finding is that because adults, our immune systems just are not set up the same way as children. So we need a little extra help. And the older we get, the more help our immune system needs to be able to fight the disease. And that's why we need the booster. It just gives us that extra oomph in our immune system to fight off this disease, especially as it continues to mutate.
Got it. All right. So we're gonna put a little umph in it for those of us who are
A
choosing to get
little
vaccinated.
oomph.
And then for
Yes.
those who are not, or even if you are, for me, I'm vaccinated, but I still get tested weekly. In my DJ life, I'm in the clubs, I'm around a lot of people. My birthday was this past weekend. I was in the streets. I was around a lot of people. I got to go get tested today. How often do you recommend people get tested? For me, I do it as a precaution because I'm in a house with
Yeah.
immunocompromised people, with young people who can't get vaccinated. But I've never had symptoms. I just do it as a precaution. Do you recommend that for unvaccinated people to do?
We recommend you get testing mostly when you're symptomatic. The
Mhm.
best thing you can do if you're unvaccinated is just put on a mask. Put on a mask and do your frequent hand hygiene. Wherever you go, if you're outside of your home to protect other people as well as yourself, just put on a mask. I mean, and I know people hate to go partying with the mask on, but I went to the Chanhassen Dinner Theater this weekend because my soror was singing Gladys Knight, and that's my girl, and I had on my cute sparkly mask the entire time. So, and even though I'm vaccinated, but again, I have to protect my son. And so
Mhm.
I didn't want to be around somebody who potentially had COVID and then I got it. I'm asymptomatic and now I'm giving it to him, who, even though he's vaccinated, his immune system is still really weak.
Mhm.
So, I would just say if you're unvaccinated, take the precautions, wear the mask, do the hand hygiene, maintain your distance, the same things we were doing before we had the vaccine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of your son, I want to go back to focusing on Black men as we
Yes.
get deeper into this conversation. So producers, if you could bring our panelists back to the stage, we're going to do a little activity really quick. And I just, want to ask you guys some questions. You don't have to respond audibly, just raise your hand. And we're going to go through these series of questions real quick. So by a show of hands, how many of you trust that the medical system will take care of your health needs? Raise your hand if you believe that. Nobody hand is going up. Okay. By a show of hands, how many of you have a primary care provider? Nobody's hands is going up. Oh, wait, did somebody's hand go up, Joe's? Okay. By a show of hands, how many of you see a therapist or a counselor? All right, we got Joe. By a show of hands, how many of you work out on a regular basis? Boom, all of us. All right, by a show many of hands, how many of you would go to the doctor today if you started to feel sick? All right. By a show of hands, how many of you engage in Eastern or holistic wellness practices? Okay. Everybody. So I want to take a minute to now unpack that. I see that we're a group who focuses a little more on Eastern practices, and I think that's really beautiful and really important, and not something that we typically associate with Black men and their health. So I want to ask all of you, like, what is your self-care process? How do you keep yourself healthy? What are those Eastern or holistic things that you're tapping into to take care of yourself? Bruce, I'll start with you.
I want to make sure that my sound isn't acting crazy because I was hearing you kind of weird here. Am I good? You guys can hear me clearly?
Hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. First off, just being mindful. And I think that all of this kind of comes back to stopping and breathing and being able to notice things when you breathe about your body. I feel like for me personally, if there's something wrong with me, I have practices put in places to where I will be able to recognize and then address in the manner that I feel specific to whatever it is. Self-care is, for me, being somebody who does multiple different things like everybody else on the panel, but taking the opportunity to stop and knowing when I am about to burn out, because I believe in the holistic system of health, being the things that you're doing, the way that you're living, all of that comes back as and is a reflection of your physical self, the physical what you see on the outside.
I love it. I love it. And we're going to talk a little bit later about Bruce and when he's teaching his yoga classes. They're really dope. Joe, why don't you go next? Tell us about your self-care wellness practices.
Yeah. For me, when we talk about non-Western or Eastern healthcare practices, I think about the mind, body, spirit, like holistic practices. And for me, I have to make sure that I'm tapping into all those spaces within myself. And I'm paying attention and I'm aware of what's going on with myself. And yeah, like I said, I have a doctor, I have a therapist, and I connect to those folks as well. But my first defense is myself, and how am I being conscious and intentional about what I'm putting in my body and about the environment that I'm in. And so for me, it's about being really intentional about all those things. I'm a vegetarian. I'm on the vegan journey. You know what I'm saying? But there's certain things that I don't put in my body for that very reason, because I want to make sure that, that I'm healthy. And there's certain environments, like I'm very intentional about the environment that I'm in most frequently. And those sorts of things are how I navigate, how I move through the world, to be intentional about my self-care and that I'm as healthy as I possibly can be. And then similar to what Bruce said, is because of those things, because of that intentionality, then when there's something wrong, I know immediately. I'm like, oh, yep. Okay. So what does my body need? And I really believe that, the earth has so much nourishment and so much medicine that we can connect with, that could help, cultivate more health and well-being. And so just having a deeper understanding of how to connect to that as well has been really helpful for me.
I dig it. And your timepiece is cold, Joe. You see how he had it propped up in the camera like that? I dig the placement, Joe. I dig the placement. Okay, TC.
I
Tell
promise
us-
just happened that.
He said, I just can't help it. I'm just so smooth. See, it's the wellness in me. TC, tell us about your self-care practices.
First, I want to say, regarding the last questions with the primary healthcare and the physicians, I didn't raise my hand, but I don't want that to look as not an attempt to make a connection with healthcare providers. I just never felt that connection to where I felt understood or really just felt heard when I was expressing what was going on. So I chose to take my own health as my own responsibility, take it into my own hands. So I started looking into Eastern medicine or practices. For example, yoga was one thing that connected. It just did something to my mind. It might have been the space that I was in after I graduated college. You finna go on this milestone. I'm like, why do I still feel like this mentally, even though I'm graduating college? Why I still feel like I'm about to go back to the hood where, what I'm saying, it's supposed to be a great achievement, but I still feel discombobulated. Almost an anxiety and depression was heavy over me. So I remember that next morning I had a whiteboard. I said, and I wrote meditate, cut out certain things that's within my diet and exercise. And I had carried on with that for a couple of months. I got into yoga and started learning how to intentionally breathe. I went on like a 2-month vegan kind of, like it was vegan. I was eating a lot of raw fruits, raw vegetables, nuts like cashews, walnuts, and stuff like that. I might have had a little potatoes, but I was real intentional with not eating meat. And I can't even explain, like, I'm not gonna push veganism on anybody because I know that it's hard, but it was the mental discipline that came with being intentional and conscious of what I was putting into my body, because I felt I felt very sensitive within my spirit, even within my body, and I just noticed a lot of changes that was going on. So that was some years ago. After that, I one of the brothers said, it's really where you're mentally at in an environment too. Because although I changed environments, and if that weighed on me and put me in a different space, I didn't know how to build those routines within my life for me to fall back on. It was kind of like I was just, continuing to go. And then I'll remember maybe a year later, like, oh, this is what I did to get myself out of this. And then I'll fall back on that. So right now, as far as my self-care routines, I'm trying to be intentional as soon as I wake up, on what I'm putting in my body. Like right now, I'm drinking some very bitter tea, but the properties of it is like it's detoxing my blood. It's helping with it's immune system boosters. You know what I mean? Elderberry, sea moss, bladderwrack, stuff like that. That you can be putting in your body on a daily. I try to do that. Then I go to the gym, or if I don't have access to a gym, I'll take a 15-minute, 20-minute yoga routine just to get within my body. Like one of the brothers said, you got to be able to scan your body. We don't know how to do that. I had to learn how to sit there and be still, because I'm feeling like if I'm not moving, then I'm not doing. So it's like really learning how to be within comfortable with yourself, breathe, settle down, and, feel where's that pain coming from? Where can you pay more attention to? So those are like the self-care routines I try to do, is be conscious of what I'm putting in my body, move my body around, do something body-based, and be mentally aware of what I'm consuming, even mentally. So like it's the holistic aspect that I feel like we all can agree on. We looking at that person as a whole being, instead of like, oh no, it's one thing. It's not just physical. It's not just mental. It's not just spiritual. It's everything that encompasses that makes that person up.
Exactly. It's the mind, body, spirit, right? And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, and how you all came to be on these wellness journeys, because I'm sure some of our audience members want to know. But really quick, I want to go to Adriene, who has a story for us on Black men and getting connected to physicians.
Thanks, Britt. So I'm so glad to hear that many of our men on the panel have a physician at the ready. I will tell you my story. I have too many stories and they're all sad, but that's life. I had 3 uncles, and I do say had because they're all dead now. 2 of them died in their 30s, and we never knew why. And of course, back then, this was back in the 60s, 70s, healthcare was much less appropriate for us as it is now. And then my last uncle to die was an internal medicine physician. And he is what we would call healthy as a horse. He was a runner. He ate healthy. He lived a healthy life. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. And he was at Meharry Medical Center. He was in the process of opening up his own private office with a partner. And he went into the office one day and literally walked into the door, fainted, and died. And from his death, we discovered that he had a really rare arrhythmia, heart arrhythmia, that is probably the reason why my other 2 uncles died. But as a result of my uncle dying, all the men in my family went to a cardiologist to get tested. And we found out that both of my brothers and all of my male cousins all have that same arrhythmia. It's one that's rare, it's not easy to detect, but if you know that you're looking for it, you can find it. And all of them have it. And so all of them started to get treatment to prevent them from literally one day having this arrhythmia and falling out and dying. And I would just like to say to all the men that are watching this show, I understand the distrust with the medical field. I understand that you were, taking care of your bodies, and I am proud of you. But please go somewhere and just have a physician somewhere in your repertoire so that we can make sure that things like that aren't happening to you. And we have Northpoint Health and Wellness, we have Minnesota Community Care. They have Black physicians that know about different diseases and how they impact the Black community. So you have a lot of resources that you can utilize to get the care that you need and deserve that's specific to you. So, like I said, I understand the distrust and the questions about the medical community. Totally get that. Find somebody that looks like you and knows about you, and and you don't have to go all the time, but at least once a year, just go and get a physical, because I don't want you to be like me and losing all of your uncles at a young age when it's preventable.
Absolutely, Adrienne. Thank you for sharing. And I want to give my condolences to you and to your family. I feel like we've all got stories like that, right? Of tragic things happening out of nowhere. And the silver lining in these tragedies is just what you said, Adrienne. The conversation starts happening. Right. And I think that's one of the best things that we can do as Black people is to have honest conversations about what is going on with our health. Talk to your uncles, your aunties, grandma, mother, whoever is around you. Learn as much about your family history as you can. And then because of the ways in which our families have been systemically, separated over time, of course, some of us are not going to be able to know everything about our health history as it relates to our families. But what we can do is also look at our historical trauma and start to think about, just because of the melanin that's in my body, because of the things that my ancestors have experienced, what am I disproportionately more likely to be impacted by? What am I pre-exposed to? And how can I navigate those things? This morning, I was watching The Breakfast Club with Resma, hometown talent. I mean, he's originally from Detroit, but Resma Mekanen, I think I'm saying his last name right. If you know Resma, he wrote a book called In My Grandmother's Hands, and it's about the ways in which we pass down trauma from generation to generation, and how whiteness and its pervasiveness, not just through our societies, but through our bodies over time, have impacted us. And so being able to have conversations is very much so real. It's easy to normalize, oh, another Black man got killed by the police, but that's trauma. We shouldn't normalize that. It's not normal for us to witness death. And when we see somebody who looks like us constantly dying or being sick or being incarcerated or living in these negative conditions, we can't normalize these things. It's important for us to stop even in those moments and to say, how is this impacting my body? how am I perceiving this news, So I want to talk about that. Being said, Resmaa has an amazing book and an amazing interview on The Breakfast Club. Definitely go check it out. He also talks a little bit about his own wellness journey. I want to know about our panelists and their wellness journey and how they have become practitioners of wellness. So each panelist, if you could take a moment to tell us about the work that you do to support yourself and others on their wellness journey. Joe, I will start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's a great question. For me, my journey, I identify as a healing artist. Like, the reason why I'm even an artist is to create more space for healing and joy. And I would name like four things I would name as to why that is. So one, when I was a kid, I was really, really sick. I was so sick one time I passed out on the bathroom floor, was rushed to the emergency room. I was hospitalized. Throughout elementary school, I was always in and out of the hospital. And during that time, I used art as a way to cope through my experiences, in a way to like process my emotions, as a way to release and kind of tap into like this deeper healing and empowerment and liberation. And like I was able to kind of cultivate those things through music and poetry and theater. And for me, that was like this deeply personal, vulnerable journey. And then I discovered that I wasn't the only one, that we could, like, anybody could tap into that, anybody could do that. And so I started building community around that, inviting other people to practice some of the same things that were healing and liberating for me. So that's been part of my journey early on. And then what furthered that journey was, I would name three people in particular. One would be one of my former partners. When we were together, she would lovingly, call me out and call me in whenever I was like kind of operating out of like just this male ego and just focusing on like my own needs or whatever. She would like, yo, like that's kind of toxic, or that's like patriarchal or whatever. And, this really loving way. And that brought me to this deeper awareness of some of my own patterns that I didn't even know about. And so I was like, yo, I got to do work around that. And so that was part of my journey. And then I was also named, you already talked about Resmaa Minicum, who I had the joy and honor of being able to go to some of his trainings. He was doing like live in-person trainings like a couple years prior to the pandemic. And so I would go to his trainings, I read his book, and I was really engaging in that somatic work, that like skill building of paying attention to my body. What do I feel? Where do I feel it? How do I work through this, right? And so that was one of the first people. And then Dr. Joy Lewis, got a shout out to
shout out to Dr. Joy.
Yeah, a friend and mentor of mine. I've taken training and classes from her as well around radical self-care. And all of those things have like gifted me with a lot of skills and tools and practices that I use and I try to invite other people into. And art for me is like the space that catalyzes all of that. So
yes, and so you are a performing artist, a recording artist. You facilitate space for other people to perform through open mics and healing circles and things like that. And before we wrap up the show, if you have anything coming up, I want people to know about it. So thank you for sharing. TC, we'll go to you next. Tell us about your work and how you're helping other people facilitate healing.
It started, like I said, I started my journey around 2016 once I finished college, which was just becoming more self-aware, trying to learn how to manage my own trauma that I didn't even know, because it's not something that we just openly discussed while I was growing up. I had to major in psychology to kind of pay attention to my own behavior patterns and the way that I was thinking. So I took that experience, my experiences growing up. And once I got to Minnesota, I said that I wanted to plant my feet and just turn over a new, get intentional about what career or work I was getting into. I got into human services for the last 5 years. I've been working in human services, and I started advocating for youth that's experiencing homelessness through a nonprofit called Youth Link. And coming up in those spaces that we would be in and drop in, I seen the trauma that up close and just that's plaguing the community, that's in a cycle, being in a cycle of survival, you're not paying attention to your health. And it taught me more about myself, about how I could pay attention to my own mental health and how things are still affecting me. So I came up with a few initiatives that I took. I just say I started this self-empowerment group called Brother to Brother, which was a facilitated self-empowerment group for them that was looking through a culturally competent lens. Because I agree with you, like you said earlier, Brittany, it starts with a conversation. And I want to say thank you, Miss Adriene, for sharing your story, because what we all can agree on is that you have to take your healing into your own hands, whatever that may look like, regardless if you choosing Eastern medicine or if it's going to be Western. Guys, yeah, go get a physical every year or every month if that's what you need to do, to take that into your own hands. So the way that I did it for myself was just becoming a facilitator to curate a space for brothers to be vulnerable, to have these conversations that are taboo or not very stereotypical. And then I started Mind Body Spirit Holistic Fitness LLC, and that's just an umbrella for a whole bunch of services that I want to provide. I'm a yoga teacher, so that's one way that I want to be able to connect with our community. Right now, I do a little self-educating upon herbs and how to use medicine to heal yourself internally, and just looking for more opportunities to be able to use that as a conduit to build bridges to health in our community, starting conversations and just picking it up from there.
Thank you for sharing. Bruce, let's go to you. I know you are also a yoga instructor, but tell us about how you help other people facilitate their wellness.
Well, of course, through laughter. I mean, a lot of people know me through comedy and bringing laughter to many different areas. But initially, for me, I think that it started with just sharing my disciplines, sharing me incorporating different disciplines into my life, and the reflection of those as I go on those journeys, and then allowing people to see those and practice those, like 50 days of water, 50 days vegan, month of meditation, et cetera, just introducing people to the things that I discover as I go on my own journey, because I don't read the books that another person might read. Somebody recommended that to me, that you don't know that person. So if I share some of the practices that I learned, it'll start the rabbit hole process. And I feel like that is where a lot of healing happens, is when you start to go down those different pathways of information that is not given to you like readily available. I would say it is readily available, but it, like Brother Thomas said, is sort of taboo. Primarily right now, what I'm doing is bringing laughter. That's my goal. It's the easiest way to induce the process of healing and breath on an individual is to make them laugh. And so every Thursday I have the comedy show, producing other comedy shows throughout the cities, traveling around the country, sharing my experiences really, and sharing the stories that link us all together. Because through fellowship and communication and conversation, we realize that we're pretty much the same. You only face what other men have met, basically. And then, laughter is a space to where you remove yourself from what you're going through and experience nostalgia or a relation in the story that whoever the person is that's speaking or telling jokes, the comedian, is given. So you almost like you pull yourself from a moment. I've had incidents one time where a lady came to the show. We had a comedian from New York named Willie Lynch, and he's a comedian who focuses a lot on like holistic Dr. Sebi. Like he'll go in on you. And after the show, the lady came and said, "Today my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And it's been hard for her all day. I brought her to the show and she was laughing the whole time. And she actually said to me that she had a new way to look at her journey going forward." And it's moments like that that let me know that this is something that is more than just how it is actually tapping into people's pain points and finding light in those really dark areas. So those are some of the ways that I move through life and shine my light.
Absolutely. It's so important that you say that. Laughter is absolutely medicine, just as rest is medicine. One of our panelists brought that up earlier. I think we often think that we have to just keep moving all the time, when in fact, the act of constant movement is actually a trauma response. And I think sometimes people can use humor to deflect instead of tapping into their vulnerability, instead of allowing them to find the genuine, natural humor within life and laugh at that. But in order for you to really be in that space, you have to be open to it. You have to be receptive to it, right? And those are not easy things to do. I know I was watching a different Breakfast Club clip with a man by the name of Jason Wilson, and he talked about how Black men, when they don't even receive compliments, well, it's always a deflection. Oh, it's just you, brothers. It's this, it's that. And it's like, no, sit in that space, receive it, know that you're great, because that's vulnerability, right? He also talked about the process of working, because we're told to be masculine, to be a man, that's what you got to do. But I feel like a lot of Black men haven't actually been taught that, like, rest and lightheartedness and those things are also an essential part of your masculinity and your sustainability. So our producers are going to play that clip, and then we're going to come back and talk about it.
How important is it for men to give other men positive affirmations? Because, I thought about this after the Mental Wealth Expo yesterday, because a lot of stuff came up for me when we was on the panel having a conversation. That's why the tears came, because it's like, just listening to you tell me, oh, I'm proud of you, yada, yada. I'm like, damn, yo, I didn't get that the way I wanted to growing up from my father. So even just hearing it from another Black man that you respect is like, whoa.
Yeah. I thank you for who you are. And I meant everything that I said, man. I'm proud of you. And that's why I affirmed you. And we need to affirm each other that way. And then more so, as I told our brother Van Lathan, when I was on his podcast, we're so quick to just deflect it or just hear, no, you the man too. I love what you're doing. Like, no, I want you to hold that, brother, because you're doing some great things, and I want you to really embrace who you are as a man. As men, we live from what we do instead of who we are. We've adopted grinding mentality, which if you look up the word itself, it means to wear down, to torment, to crush, to oppress. And that's why when you see most people who grind, they look wore out. I work hard, but I rest hard as well. I thought it was just Black men who struggle with taking naps. But when I started speaking more, my white brothers, other brothers of different ethnicities was coming up to me like, dude, when my wife come home, I jump up. I'm like, what is that? Because we feel we're only worth what we do. How many Father's Days, and I use myself as an example, my family tried to celebrate me. I said, no, I'm good. I don't need nothing. Because again, we feel that we're only good for what we do instead of who we are. Our family, our women in our lives try to love us. Our children want to affirm us. But because it's deep, we long for it so long, we don't even know how to receive it when we get it. And that's the issue. And that's why I say we need to heal. And healing requires vulnerability, because you got to allow yourself to open up and release everything that's going on. Put it out in front of you so you can see it and start casting things away that no longer benefit you or never benefited you.
Shout out to the Breakfast Club for adding these thoughtful conversations in. And say what you want about Charlemagne the God, but he's on his own wellness journey, and he's bringing it into the space in his own way, right? Not everybody is going to be a Resma or a Dr. Joy, but you can influence people and inspire them into their own wellness in your own respective spaces and in your own way. So panelists, I want to ask you, what's your response to that clip? Joe, I'll start with you. What resonated for you?
Yo, I thought that was beautiful. I almost got a little teared up a little bit. I was like, yo,
Hey.
I felt that real talk. Like, even as we started this talk, I was getting compliments, and I was kind of deflecting too. I was like, yo, I mean, I know I'm fly. I already know it. But like, I always want everybody to get their shine on. I think I shine brighter when we all shine together. But just that reality of like, yeah, we need to create space for us to sit in the affirmation of all that we are, especially as brothers. Like, I don't think we allow ourselves the opportunity as much as we can. So that was a powerful reminder for me. I think that's really beautiful. And yeah, what he said about being vulnerable, I'm a huge advocate of men being vulnerable, because that's not what I was taught growing up. It was really stigmatized to express your emotions. As an artist, that's been my outlet. But overall, throughout culture, being vulnerable and expressive and emotionally intelligent as a brother hasn't been as held, hasn't been as accepted and affirmed. And so every opportunity I get, I try to create the space for that. So I really rock with that. I really appreciate that we're naming it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. TC, what was your response to that video?
Definitely got to catch that interview. I definitely like Jason. He had this clip from way back in the day that I seen about him teaching this young black boy to kind of push through his fears. Definitely the same, always been the same type of person who's allowed space for young black boys or even just black men and men period to be vulnerable. When I look at that clip, that's the main two things that resonated is grinding and then being vulnerable, because we have developed this culture to where we feel like, now we got to grind. Well, I know that's how I feel. Like, if I ain't grinding, I ain't doing it. Everything could be going bad in my life, but I still got to grind, bro. Like, I still got to go get it. That's what I tell myself. Like, nah, just get it. No, work a little harder to the point where you just burn out. You know, now your mental health is spiraling and everything around you is crumbling. And it takes a vulnerable person, even in this moment, for me to admit that some of the things that I've been used to growing up and patterns that I developed. So seeing that clip and him touching upon having men reaffirm each other and then hold that, like, you know, because I know we so quick to feel cringy, you know, like, no, bro, take this compliment, hold that, bro. No, don't even say nothing, just hold that, bro. I see you doing your thing, just hold that. For real, you deserve to have another man reaffirm you and us not have to feel any type of way about it, because we confident within ourselves. And that's what type of, those are type of conversations that we need to have that's going to touch the youth that's coming up now, you know, to become emotionally intelligent and know that, like, no, that's not just a skill. That's another essential virtue. You got to be emotionally intelligent. You got to be able to emotionally regulate. And the only way you learn how to do that is to be able to be vulnerable. Yeah, being allowed to cry and knowing that it's okay to have some tears. It's okay to feel some type of way. But you got to have spaces for that. You know, you got to have spaces where they're going to feel comfortable with being vulnerable. So that's what I took from the clip. I think it was dope.
I love that. Bruce, how about you?
I agree 100% with that. I think that we, especially as black men, have had the family dynamic messed up a little bit for generations. And so years and years of not being affirmed or being separated from fathers or having to find a male role model or a father figure or somebody in that to instill that language in you, that knowledge in you, that power in you to be able to accept a compliment, to be able to move with balance through life rather than being heavy on one side because that's what the social construct says. Those conversations are definitely needed. And shout out to everybody who is having them and moving in that space.
Well, Bruce, let me ask you, how did you break out of the social construct of like what society tells you that you are as a Black man? Traditionally, when I think of somebody who does yoga, I don't think of you or Tom. I mean, I do because I know y'all, but I think society, y'all are not the first people that they think of. Yet here you are tapping in and kind of redefining what Black masculinity looks like and what Black male healing looks like. How did you break that mold?
I'm still breaking it. I'm still on the journey of breaking it because there are things that were taught to me that I am just now, as a 6-year-old man, understanding that are more surface level or on a deeper level. also just like not caring about what the outside world, how the outside world perceives me, more than I care about how I perceive me.
Mm-hmm.
I care, definitely, but I care about how I perceive myself more, because I know that's where my power is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have power if I'm operating out on how the outside world wants me to operate. All my power comes from me living amongst my morals, living amongst my perspective, learning, and being comfortable with my journey as Bruce, rather than how anybody else looks at me. I'm still on that journey, definitely, but this is how I move through it. Like, for instance, I knew I wanted to quit my job. I braided my beard so that people would start to get intimidated. That's how the beard braid started. I was like, I'm finna just grow my beard out. They not intimidated by the beard. I'm gonna braid my beards. Eventually, I got to the point to where I didn't care. I was at work like this, and I built up the confidence to be like, you know what? I don't need this. I can leave and really start to live my life the way I want to live it, rather than go on the path that was kind of created for me, or that somebody else said that this is what I was supposed to be. I did all the things I was supposed to do. At what point do I get to do what I want to do?
It's about disrupting the status quo at the end of the day, right?
Right.
Society tells Black men that you are supposed to be subservient to, the dominant white regime, right? That you're supposed to feed into these negative stereotypes, that you're supposed to be incarcerated, that you're supposed to be so hyper masculine that you don't have full control over your body. And so I think Black male healing and healing for our community as a whole is to free yourself of all of that messaging that you're fed from the time that you come into this world, and that you come into your own and say, this is who I am, in spite of the fact that my community may be suffering, and in spite of the fact that my job may have this particular culture. This is who I choose to be in the world. This is how I choose to show up. This is how I choose to dress. This is how I want to vibrate. And that in tuneness with my own self is not just about physical aesthetic, right? But it's a spiritual thing. It's about being in alignment. I was watching a piece of that same Breakfast Club clip earlier today, and he said, even God cried, and as Black men, we might see ourselves as gods, but do we realize it's God-like to tap into that level of emotion and vulnerability? It's about deconstructing all of the things to make something else. Thomas, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I definitely want to, like what Bruce was saying. That's like some of the realest stuff. That metaphor, you braiding your beard to become more, imitating or intimidating. I mean, and not so much as trying to even cause any conflict. It's like, no, this is who I am. So what I hear when I hear that is like being able to show up as your authentic self and be confident within that. Because like like when I think back, I remember I used to enjoy Glee Club when I was in elementary. Like I used to like to be in the Glee Club, but I didn't have the confidence the way that the Glee Club wanted me. Like they wanted me to be Kirk Franklin on this song that he had. And I didn't feel confident enough to like shout like he did, because like when I go home, they like, you doing Glee Club? Man, we don't do no, you know what I mean? Like we don't do no Glee Club, So next year I'm running from the Glee Club. I'm like, no, that's lame. And that's like so many opportunities that you have to get connected with your authentic self before you reach adulthood. Now, when you're in adulthood, you like gotta rearrange who you are to change into these spaces, because you didn't have that opportunity to explore the unconventional, the who you really are. They try to make you who you are. Like you got to be hard. You got to be, in order to get this respect around these type of spaces. So that definitely resonated with me. And when it comes to yoga, that's me tapping into like my authentic self, arts, craft, things like that, being able to move my body. I remember the first time I got introduced to it was around older ladies. They was killing, and I was in there shaking, sweating, about to fall out. But it was my first introduction, and like I had pivotal moments within that. I definitely want to shout out 612 Jungle, Gabby Yoga. Gabby, man, she had a session with me the first time I got in her class. It was just so serene. It was around I think I want to say the tragedy of George Floyd. Like, I don't know, I think it was around then. I went into her class and I had never been in a space that felt so inviting for me to be vulnerable. And I think I was just going through one of my flows, and next thing you know, I didn't even know I was gonna cry. I had a few tears that fell. And that was my second experience that I had with yoga like that. The first one was when Nipsey Hussle had died. I was feeling real heavy and I didn't know why, but his music had got me out of a dark place, and like just listening to him and becoming inspired so much. And then like to have that snatched away, I'm like, oh, I don't know this man on a personal level. So, I shouldn't even feel this way. But after I did my yoga, I was just sitting there and I just felt so heavy. And, that allowed me to be vulnerable in that moment to where somebody asked me, what's wrong? And I just, I started crying. I was like, man, they just took this brother from us, So yoga definitely helped me have moments to where I'm able to be vulnerable. And with that being said, I recorded a little bit, and some of my friends didn't see me grow up to where didn't have the emotional intelligence. I was probably more violent, more confrontational because I had a chip on my shoulder or trauma that I didn't know how to deal with besides respond with anger, because I didn't have nobody teaching me how to be vulnerable or these coping skills to respond in a different manner. I was always defensive. So yoga helped me just release that. Now, and I don't want to go off on no tangent, but it's something that I feel like is great for me and it's great for our community, because I see these brothers, they hit me up in my inbox, the same ones that might have been like, oh man, you ain't doing no yoga, that's feminine, or that's like, they see me doing like, bro, that really be helping you? Like, I want to get into the basis of it. Like, just teach me something. Because it's not as easy as people think. You really being intentional with your breathing. You getting into your body. You releasing trauma that's been passed down, that's been in your body forever. So that's what I had to say about that part.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying, even if it's just learning something, learning a couple yoga poses to help you ground in the morning, learning a sun salutation, not everybody is going to take it to the level that you two have taken it, where you're able to actually be practitioners and help other people on their journeys. But even just having some tools in your tool belt is an incredible step forward in moving forward in your health journey. So I want to honor that we are at time. I know it's raining out. Joe's having some Wi-Fi issues, but rain is cleansing, just as our tears are. So from everything that's falling down, new things will grow. And I think that's important for us to remember as we wrap up this conversation about trauma, is like, as things may fall down within our lives or within ourselves, like new things get to grow from that. Right. So panelists, thank you so much for your time.
It's over. Oh man, we need a part 3, Brittany. You diving into some good stuff, man.
Okay, so I'm glad you said it. Producers, look, I always be pushing for other shows. Producers, y'all heard it. I ain't say it.
You diving into some good stuff.
That was our panelists, and I think we should definitely continue these conversations because they're necessary, and to hear them from you all is incredibly important, not just for Black men, but for Black women like myself as well. We got our brother Joe back. We got our sis Adriene back. I know, Joe, I know we gave you best dressed, but Adriene over there doing it too. I got before we go as well. I want to remind you guys, that clip that we played earlier, it's on the Breakfast Club. Go check it out. There's a few amazing conversations. And of course, you can watch part 1 of this conversation on the African American Leadership Forum Facebook page and YouTube page. Our next episode is November 3rd. November 3rd, and it's at 1:30 p.m. We're going to be unpacking the election that's happening. There's a big vote coming up on if the Minneapolis Police Department will be defunded. So regardless of what the results are, we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to commit to continue these wellness conversations. So thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Life Amplified. For more information on our producers as well as our sponsors, check out the outro. Be good to yourself and be good to others. Until next time.
Thank you.
Attitude.